In this video clip on small manufacturing software, we're going to discuss the methodology of POs received and not invoiced. Basically, we have a concept to be able to receive and balance the activity or GL activity in regards to receiving purchase orders before the invoice is received from the vendor. So I want to point out just real quick how that's processed through the GL accounts through a debit and credit process. So in a typical receipt, not when the PO happens, but when you receive the inventory, there is a debit to the inventory account. For this example, let's say we received 10 parts at $10 each for a $100 debit to that inventory account. And if you're curious to where that GL account is set, it's set per part number. So if we go over to the items and then we go into that item, and under here underneath the GL tab or GL accounts tab on that item, there is an inventory/expense account, and that's the GL account that's going to be debited during the activity. So it's going to debit that activity for $100, and then it's going to credit the POs received not invoiced account, which is an account that you set under the company defaults for the opposite side, or the credit, to give you a balanced entry upon receiving that inventory. And so during that time between the receipt and the receiving of the invoice, which is what we show on this next activity, there is a point in time where you may have items that have been received but you've not received the accounts payable invoice. And so that's what this account POs received not invoiced is for. It is for to show you an accounting of that value, and again, it should be a reasonable value in regards to the amount or the value of what you've received in the past couple weeks, or some short time frame that would normally happen between the receiving the items and processing the invoice from the vendor. So we've also created a screen in the system for which you can try to process or give a detailed supporting record to that, and that's under payables and POs received not invoiced. And so when we come up with that, it defaults to today's date, and then I can change it to an earlier date, and I can say set, so it's an as of date, and it will bring up the records that it showed having been outstanding during as of that date, so as to justify the GL account on or that date. And so we even give you a total here to the right. Now we have two types of examples in this list. One where the item has been invoiced, and so it does show a date here under invoice date, but we can note that the invoice date actually happened prior to the as of date. So it's kind of an interesting scenario where you receive an item and it was actually invoiced prior. So if there was a delay in shipping or something, that your vendor is actually kicking out the invoice maybe days before you receive the goods. And so on this example here, we show it, you receive the goods on 4/9 of 2012, but the invoice date is dated for 3/27 of 2012. In this example then, to clear up the POs received not invoiced, it actually created the secondary entry that we're talking about earlier on a date prior to the first entry. And so we want to show both those types of activities. So our second kind of entry here, when you're processing the bill, it will debit the POs received not invoiced for the amount that was received, and then it will move it to accounts payable so you can pay the bill. So in this first example, we're actually showing a case where it actually is a negative because it's going to go the opposite direction. Now normally it's going to be a positive, which is translated to a credit, which is a negative, so it's a little number back and forth there. Where the second example here is for an item that we received on 3/29, but as of 3/31 we had not received the invoice. We actually received the invoice later. so that one's outstanding. And so we're going to net those two. And what this supporting thing is for you to check your GL trial balance or summary trial balance for the end of the month or any time during the month, as to making sure it's squared up with the detailed records. So in some cases you may have something that was paid via credit card, or it was a simple exchange, or sometimes we've had a purchase order for samples, yet we wanted to show a dollar value on the item. So you get some stuff hanging out here that are showing, wait, we've never received a bill. Well, if you paid for it by a credit card, maybe you're never going to get a bill directly for that. So what we do is we give you the ability to clear the entry, and when you clear the entry, it will fill in the date with respect to the as of date, so that you can say, no, it was taken care of, it was taken care of by another means. But there's also a reminder, and I'm going to just give you an example with this one. I have to flip it to mode so it turns red so I can change it. So I'm going to clear this, and when I say OK on this, it gives us a warning to say, hey, manual entry of JVs may be required to balance your received not invoiced account. And so it's just a reminder to say, if you did process it with your credit card, hopefully you use the GL account POs received not invoiced, because you need to offset it correctly. So we try to have you go through this once a month, make sure it's clean to see what it's showing, check something that shows outstanding. If you do, you need to manually clear it, and maybe you need to manually make some JVs to make it squared up with your financials. Thank you.